the May 23rd, 2022 version of the Maitland City Council meeting. If you would please remind me to remember to turn off your phones or silence your electronic devices. And let's have a moment of silence as an invocation. Thank you. And if you would please join me to stand and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, the first public hearing we have is to adopt an ordinance amending the Orange County fertilizer ordinance, or amending our ordinance, which is doing because of the Orange County fertilizer ordinance. Laura, would you please read the title?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, amending Chapter 20, Section 20-96 of the Maitland City Code to clarify application of Orange County fertilizer ordinance as amended, providing for codification, severability, conflicts, and an effective date.
Okay, thank you. And we have Kim Tracy to lead us in. Would you please introduce the item?
Yes, at your last meeting, City Council voted to introduce this amendment to Section 20-96, which is the Fertilizer Management Ordinance. This proposed amendment is it's meant to stay consistent with the Orange County Code and also to clarify the application of the code. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions of the Public Works Director? Questions? Okay, let's open the public hearing on the ordinance adoption. Does anybody like to address this matter for council? Seeing none, let's close the public hearing.
I'll move to adopt an ordinance amending section 2096 of the City Code to clarify the application of the Orange County Fertilizer Management Ordinance within the City of Maitland as adopted.
I love it. I'll second that.
You did it in one breath.
Wow.
Good.
It's very impressive.
I think you made it into a run-on sentence.
Practice.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Guthrie?
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison?
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel?
Aye.
Councilmember Wild?
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes?
Aye. Okay, the next two public hearings regard ordinances which we're not going to address tonight. They've been pulled. I believe we have a little more work to do before they're coming back to us at the first meeting in June. Is that right?
June 13th.
June 13th. Okay. So we're done with the ordinances for the evening. Is there any old business for the city manager?
Well, I'm going to try to get through it. I was going to just give a summary of Waste Pro. I mean, what's going on with Waste Pro and more importantly, Seminole County that's driving our solid waste issues. So the majority of the issues stem from changes made unilaterally by Seminole County Solid Waste Division without notification to the City of Maitland. So we have yet to be notified by them of anything or any changes. They began unilaterally diverting Waste Pro Maitland trucks. So we contract with Waste Pro and we contract with Seminole County. They somehow decided that means they have purview over Waste Pro, which they don't. So they started diverting them from the central transfer station, which is right here in Longwood, to Geneva, which is 50 minutes minimum each way. And our finance department began calling them in February, saying and emailing the solid waste department saying what's happening, why are they being diverted. That's not what our agreement said. And to date, Jerry has never received a response from anyone in Seminole County, really in any of their divisions that have any, they just basically go to voicemail or email and you don't hear back. So On March 2nd, I called over and I spoke to Mr. Montana, Solid Waste, and followed up with an email once I got an email address, and he said he would look into it and call me back. I attached our interlocal with my hypothesis that what they were doing, they couldn't actually do. And I got no response. So on March 12th, I emailed the interim county manager, which is Joe Abel. He responded 4 days later that our interlocal allows the county to direct types of solid waste to any designated facility of their choice, which is actually not true. That's not what our contract says. It says they may have a contract with Waste Pro, but that is not our contract with them. So with Waste Pro and unincorporated Seminole County, they can tell them where to go. In Maitland, it's between Seminole County and Maitland. And whether we hire waste management, advanced disposal, or whoever we hire, they contract with us. So on 3/16, I responded again with the excerpts from the interlocal agreement, making it fairly evident that the Central Transfer Station is a designated facility for city solid waste, commercial, residential, recycling, all types of waste. It doesn't, nowhere in there does it say they can designate a facility for only, it says you can bring these types of materials to any designated facility. And then there's a list of designated facilities. So, excuse me. On the 16th, Mr. Abel copied Attorney David Shields and stated he would coordinate a meeting between Seminole County and Maitland. And a little less than a month later, no response from Mr. Abel or Attorney Shields. So I emailed both of them, and on the 12th, Mr. Abel advised me that they were working with the haulers to make reasonable adjustments. And of course, my response to him was, they are not authorized to negotiate with our hauler. Our interlocal is with them, or two governments with an interlocal. On April 13th, Mr. Abel informed me he had resigned and asked Mr. Attorney Shields and Mr. Balrook, who's the solid waste, to provide an appropriate response. On April 18th, I sent a letter to Mr. Shields outlining the same thing I had outlined before, my concerns with the interlocal, and to date, no response has been received from Mr. Shields, Attorney Shields. We were notified, so things seemed to be okay at that point. I think they did work with the drivers to try to improve things, but we were notified by Waste Pro that there was a new take on residential waste, and that's what's creating the issues we have now. They advised us that Seminole County has now decided that they won't take what we consider white goods or bulk waste at the transfer station, where they've been taking it for 10 years. And so they did not notify us. They just started tagging our trucks and sending them off to Geneva with no notification to the city of Maitland that anything had changed. So they stopped accepting those bulk items. The problem with Maitland is we accept them all week long. I mean, you put out a bureau, we take it, you put it, it's not a claw truck, it's going right into the back of the truck. So almost every Maitland truck is going to have some bulky waste in addition to household waste. So, sorry. So at this point, the next letter is going to be to the Board of County Commissioners, which I will draft and provide to Cliff before I mail it, so he can make a phone call. They've appointed Brian Applegate, their county attorney, as interim, but I understand he's not staying long either. Right now they're out for a search for a county manager, but I think at this point it probably rises to the level of the Board of County Commissioners.
Yes.
And they had stated they were going to get with the haulers, make adjustments and present those to their county commission, but my response was, again, you don't make adjustments with the hauler. We have an interlocal with you, so you have to negotiate with us. The downside to all of that is it will expire September 30th, and then they can come forward with whatever changes they want to make. And our option is Orange County, which is not any closer. But it may resolve some of the bulk issues. Some of the other issues could be resolved with Orange County. So, and it's not unique to us. Winter Park's having the same issue, and some of the, the few cities that do their own garbage have a little more flexibility as to how many trucks they can put out. But Waste Pro has been proactively working, and their take is that this all started with COVID, they couldn't hire drivers. A slew of drivers quit, and there's those 53-yard dumpsters that when you go to the central landfill, they fill up this big dumpster, and they take that dumpster, which makes total sense instead of sending every single garbage truck to Geneva, going past people's homes, there and back. So that's where we are. I know Waste Pro's been communicating with Michael, and Robert's been getting the word out when people aren't picked up, and I know it's a big inconvenience. So we will try to continue to work with Waste Pro, but at this point, Waste Pro is saying you really need to go to the county. They're not, they have no ability to negotiate on our behalf, and their contract with the county is different.
Well, if we have this problem with Seminole County, it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved anytime soon. It sounds like they're having difficulty answering the phone.
Yeah.
Is it time to start negotiating with Orange County?
So we will reach out to Orange County, and I believe Winter Park has reached out to Orange County, and they've reached out to us before. It is more expensive, and it is a long drive. So I think it's just a couple miles short of Geneva, the trip to Geneva.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no one.
But at least they answer their phone.
Yes, there's that. There's that. Yeah. It will cost more, but in the interest of getting the trash picked up. We haven't increased our garbage rates since 2011, so
Right.
We've been left.
not like there's no room there if we need to incur additional cost.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Do you have
Is it worth showing up to the commission meeting to actually be heard on this issue?
Waste Pro would say yes. I mean, they would say, yes, show up. So that's something we talked to them about. But I think Cliff knows Brian Applegate, and he wanted to at least be able to call him on the phone before that letter goes out to the county commissioner. But I know that they've been inundated at the county level from their own residents because of the delays in garbage, and this is their solution to that. Push it down to Waste Pro and Maitland, and make sure the unincorporated areas are picked up, because those are their customers. So, but yeah.
All right, well, keep us apprised, because I know we're hearing a lot about it.
Yeah.
Well, please extend my thank you to the Waste Pro guys, because even though we didn't get our pickup on Thursday, they did come out on Friday, and one of the supervisors was there, and he was picking up the trash himself. And so I know they're working extra long shifts to try and do this, and so it is appreciated.
There were 2 trucks on Saturday
Yeah.
picking up garbage till the evening.
I want to give them props. Also, I talked to one of my neighbors, and he told me, I think on last week they didn't pick up on Tuesday. He made a call like 8 o'clock at night to the city. Somebody here picked up and told him we'll have a truck out there tomorrow, and sure enough, so props to him.
Actually, the message to the website called him
And you
back.
called them back?
Yes.
And thank you for all the communications. For those that do see them, or even for me, it's helpful for me to have the information to convey to residents as well about how to sign up for alerts and how to register complaints.
Yeah, I think who we're missing is folks who don't use Facebook, don't go to our website. something
Yes,
like
but
that.
even if they reach out, then I've been able
They
to.
email,
Yeah. So, it's helpful.
Okay, anything else, Sharon?
No.
That's enough in one evening? Okay, next item is consent agenda. The only item on there is our minutes. We may not. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
All right. Actually, do we need a public hearing on this? No? Okay. We've got one motion.
I'll second.
There's a second. Martin, you call the roll.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Loud.
Aye. Okay. Let's see, is it public period time? Yes, it is public period time. Does anybody wish to address anything that's not on the agenda this evening? Any comment at all? No?
Not tonight.
All right. We'll close the public period and move on to the next item, which is, we have several decisions to make. First is about the appointments to the Transportation Advisory Board. And we have 2 seats available. One is Ian Lockwood is nearing the end of his term. He's eligible for reappointment, and is eager to do that. And the next is a seat that is termed out. So, Laura, would you introduce the first appointment, please?
So we have one appointment. Mr. Lockwood's first term is expiring today. He is seeking reappointment. Mr. Lockwood is eligible for reappointment. His application was attached to the agenda.
Okay. So, do we have a motion to reappoint Mr. Lockwood or any other nominees?
I'll make a motion for Ian Lockwood.
I'll second.
I'll third.
All right, but let me, if you wouldn't mind, Lindsay, if I can just, so tonight I think we're gonna follow our actual rules on this. And you're pretty close to following the rules on this. We're very close. But we want to make sure we get all the nominations out that are going to be. Anybody else have another nomination other than Ian Lockwood?
Oh, yeah,
Well, just for his seat. Okay.
We're doing them one at a time.
We do one at a
Just be
time,
for the
yeah.
first thing.
Okay.
Yeah, just for the first seat. So, if we can.
No, he's back. He's the one that's coming back.
Right.
Oh, no.
So,
Sorry.
Okay, so we don't have any competing nominees for this is the one. Okay. In which case, I think it would be appropriate for Councilperson Paul Harrison to make that third again, and then we're done.
All third.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry that I should have laid out because we kind of got in the habit of doing first, second, third thing, and I think it kind of gets in, it's actually not our rules, so we should just follow our rules on this. So we'll do that for the second appointment. Laura, would you introduce that one?
Scott Zornick has turned out, therefore he's not eligible for reappointment, creating 1 vacancy. There were 3 residents that submitted volunteer to serve applications, and all of them were in the packet.
Okay. So this one, like the other one, we'll just make sure we get all the nominees out first, and then we're going to go one by one with nominees and have a vote on each. I think that's what our rules say, but I think it's also fairly good. So let's open it up for nominations. Do we have any nominations for this?
Yeah, I'd like to, well, this one's pretty easy because we have one person on here that used to be the chair of the Municipal Advisory Board, and also being the chair served on the Metro Plan, and has a lot of connection with FDOT, so my nomination would be for Dale McDonald.
Okay. We have one nomination, is Dale McDonald. Is there any other nominations for this?
I would like to make sure that we put Andrew Smith forward. Mr. Smith is here this evening. He is a local resident, he's a father, and walks this neighborhood with his kids. I know him well. He introduced himself to me and said that he would like to be part of this board because he'd like to get more involved in seeing the future of Maitland go forward for his children and what we need to do to improve our city.
Okay. And we have a nomination for Andrew Smith. Do we have any other nominations? No nominations, okay. So let's take them alphabetically.
My first or last name.
Yes, well, okay, yes, let's go ahead. Is there any other discussion? I appreciate Councilwoman Hall Harris's discussion. Anybody else have any?
I just want to say I did talk to Mr. Smith this morning, and great guy, fantastic guy. And I told him if he doesn't get on to this board, we'd love to have him on another board. So please, whatever happens tonight, boom, thanks.
Thank you.
This is off, a little bit off, but I know Scott Thornick was involved in transportation, and I don't know, on boards like this, the term limit kind of concept, and again, this is outside this, I know this is what it is tonight, but I don't know if it's something worth looking at for some of these boards, whether or not the balance of getting new people on versus the balance of taking people who have relevant experience off is just work. And I'm not saying that I'm putting out an opinion necessarily, it's just something to think about with someone who might want to continue serving, who is involved in the transportation industry on this kind of a board. Is it worth having a term limit of only 2 terms or not? So anyway, I know like on Lakes Advisory Board, did we put term limits back on Lakes Advisory Board, Shannon? Does that have?
The charter amendment passed, and so all the boards that are appointed by you are 2-term limits.
That's it?
All boards.
And when was that charter amendment?
2012.
So I remember when I joined Lakes Advisory Board, there were people that had been there for a really
Right.
long time. So I get that. There's a balance of,
I think it was an unintended consequence of a different issue, but it affects all boards.
yeah, so it's just a different, so I don't know. I know we're looking at charter issues and stuff. Just a point.
I think the Board of Adjustments and Appeals doesn't have term limits, does it?
I think they're gone.
Are they all gone?
No.
They didn't. I think
No,
people
that was
served 12
BZA
years.
that's gone. We're going to discuss
Oh, we're
board adjustment
discussing,
appeals
yeah.
later.
But I think people have been on there for 12, 13 years.
And have never met.
Never met.
So it's just a balance of this, because I do think sometimes you,
As a continuation of that topic, and because it's mutually relevant to my reaction I had the opposite reaction that it was an easy topic, particularly because there were 3 applications before our consideration, although there's 2 nominations now before council. Because I think when you're talking about term limits or experience, that there's this double-edged sword of basically always having the same group of people determining things in the path of our city if we have no term limits and we always go with the person who has the most experience as measured by specifically time on boards, because that's something that was important to me when I came to this position, to encourage more people within our city to be engaged and to participate. And so that becomes very difficult, although everybody who's served a lot of time on the boards or any other relevant parts of our city obviously have a lot to offer, including a former mayor, and that can't really be disputed, I don't think. But also, to me, I put a strong premium on people wanting to get involved who have not otherwise had an opportunity to do so, and I certainly also wouldn't want to discourage that, but also more than that sort of message, I think for the benefit of the city, having different perspectives and different experiences also and beneficial.
Listen, and I get you, and in fact, one of the things me and Mr. Smith talked about today was, next month, 35 days from today, there's an opening on PRAP. So, there's that. There might be something on P&Z coming up. There's always a need for boards. The thing that really got me, though, is we're looking at a second FDOT transportation study coming through. And so that really says, how do we build our city? So for me, getting to somebody with experience was kind of on that end, was kind of really important. So that's kind of why I nominated.
Andrew has an engineering degree and an MBA. I think he can read a transportation study. If we're looking for ability to understand.
I would just explain
complex
myself.
documents. Yeah, no, that's fine. I just say that if we have qualified people with diverse experience, that doesn't necessarily mean just because they didn't sit there on a particular board that they can't also be cogently informed on the issues too.
Well, I think Councilman Wild's position, this is my very first vote on any transportation or on any board, advisory board. But to the extent that we're not getting applications for boards or new applications, certainly, those sorts of ideas would make sense. And I understand, I think all of Councilman Guthrie's ideas and rationale are well taken, which is why I said it's not easy for me personally in either direction at all. I also, in transparency, I also spoke with Mr. Smith. I believe he contacted, from what he told me, or at least tried to contact everybody up here within the last 24 hours or so. I also reviewed, as I'm sure everyone else up here did, the applications that came in and looking at what people put in those and trying to consider that. I also educated myself a little bit today because I needed to be educated as to what the board does. Again, because I'm new here, if you didn't know, and also on the qualifications and experiences of the other current members of the Transportation Board, because certainly I think it's important to have some people who are transportation engineers or have that sort of professional experience there, but I believe that we do have that currently. So those are the things I've considered.
For your first advisory appointment meeting, they're usually not this interesting. So, yes.
And I want to consider, it would be very helpful to me to consider everything that y'all are saying and anything else you have to say about.
I always find it's a bit challenging when I don't know. You don't know all the people. Sometimes we get them and we don't know any of the applicants personally, so it's a little bit harder to make an assessment based on either an email or an application. So I think with this one, we know, obviously, because I know one of the candidates from sitting up here, and I understand some view it as a positive, some view it as a negative, but he's really knowledgeable on the issue. So there are definitely pros and cons.
Yeah, I agree. This is not an easy, they're usually not as exciting, and it's not an easy decision to make, especially because we come very qualified candidates, and then Dale McDonald has been involved with this for a long, long time, understands all the transportation issues going way, way back. And, I think there's also a good argument to be made to get new people in who are interested in where the city's going to go and have the best interest in getting there. I remember when I first applied for a position that I guess it was the power budget, but the planning zone. I was advised by a then sitting councilman to probably I should bow out and let the incumbent be reappointed, and my time would come. So, and I did, and it was nothing after that. But I think there's, it's important, I think, to get people who are interested to get them in and get them going. And I think that Dale also has, I think Dale not only has a substantive history of what's going on, and I think Dale also has the ability to make his opinions known, even if, from wherever he's sitting. And I know that he will attend every meeting regardless of whether he's a member of the board or not. But I think, Dale's advice on all this is going to be important, as will be the advice of many people on this. So it's a difficult choice.
The only other thing, since it's so important to me to articulate my reasoning, that we were, it's indicated, I believe, in the agenda where people stated their preferences, and in Mr. Smith's primary stated one was Parks and Rec. I think as Councilman Guthrie noted, although Mr. Smith in his conversation with me today indicated a change of opinion that wasn't part of our packet. I know Mr. McDonald had changed his, and that has been a change made to our packet, and it came to my attention that was, I assume, in part because one of his first or second choices has been since dissolved, and the other, as the clerk indicated, is under consideration for dissolution. So I presumed, if that's a fair presumption, that was part of the reasoning for the change in priority as well. So I have considered that as well.
Okay. Is there any other discussions? Anybody else? All right, so let us go through these. Lauren, you're going to tell us like you do each time. And we'll start with who comes first, M or S?
A or D.
A or D. Let's go with Mr. Scott.
Let's clarify that they're going to state the name. It's not. Because we're going by.
You may ask each council who they were.
The rule.
Rules are.
So isn't it?
Each for a name to fill the vacancy from the list of nominees. So you will poll us each for a name to fill the vacancy from the list of nominees. Okay, so then actually we don't go individually, we're just going to go down the roll. Okay.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Dale McDonald.
Councilmember Hall Harrison. Anderson. Councilmember Wurzel.
Dale McDonald.
Councilmember Wild.
Dale McDonald.
Mayor Lowndes.
There we go. All right.
It's a 4-1.
Mr. Smith, I hope you heard enough encouraging talk that you'll stay with us. And
Yeah, definitely. I'll be back for the Parks and Rec.
All right. And you can show up to the Transportation Advisory Board meeting as well. They're open to the public. Okay. What do we have next? The Planning and Zoning Commission bylaws update. Take that, I guess Dan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is a amendment to the bylaws for the P&Z Commission.
I appreciate it.
There's about 7 or 8 amendments to the bylaws, and these are just updating them to reflect the newly adopted land development code. So the newly adopted land development code changed a couple processes and some definitions, so this will update them and will remove any unnecessary language as well as provide more efficient P&Z meetings. So as I indicated, there's about 7 or 8 changes. One of them is the recommendations to council. So we amended that to reflect the new responsibilities. Now the land development code gives P&Z some final decisions on stuff. And so it amends when it makes recommendations and when it makes decisions and how that's laid out. The community meeting section of the bylaws were reflected in the old code, where it talked about how that first initial public meeting went to the P&Z. That was completely unvetted, unreviewed by staff. And so it was just the first chance to kind of get a hearing of what's going on. It was causing some frustration for both P&Z as well as staff, as well as the audience, the residents, because it was completely unvetted. So the new code put the community meeting before the application is filed, and it is required to be here in the council chambers with staff and the applicant, as well as the residents or any affected parties that's notified. P&Z is no longer in that. It goes after that to the technical review, then to DRC, and then P&Z hears it for the first time with a formal recommendation from staff. And so they make the decisions that night onto council, or the decision if it's that type of case. Also, another change to the bylaws is the appointment of committees. We deleted a necessary committee because it doesn't necessarily preclude them from being able to do it, but the existing language in there didn't set out any parameters or any details about it. So that was being removed. We added a consent agenda portion of the P&Z agenda. So these are for cases that has unanimous DRC recommendation and that there is no opposition that staff knows about up front. There's no phone calls, no emails, anything like that. Things that we feel don't really garner any real discussion. Similar to council's consent, anybody on P&Z can pull it off of consent, staff can pull it off consent. Someone in the audience can ask for it to be pulled off consent, so it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to stay on. But for cases that seem to be just routine or easy, this should expedite the meetings. The last 3 changes are the amount of time an applicant has to submit an amendment or update some of their documents to P&Z. It went from 8 days to 7 days, which is consistent with our practices of getting the packets out. And then we amended the definitions to reflect the updated reference, as well as the Land Development Regulation Commission, which is really an outdated term that is not really part of the Community Planning Act anymore. So it still refers to P&Z as the Planning and Zoning Commission and the local planning agency. So all these updates to the bylaws were really just a cleanup item based on the new code language and outdated language from the statutes. Staff drafted the suggested edits, and P&Z on May 5th recommended unanimously approval for the amendments, and so now it's here tonight for council's decision. Be happy to make or answer any questions that council has.
Okay, anybody have anything for Dan?
Dan, on the community meetings, just to refresh, what is the requirement now for an applicant to have a community meeting?
So,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
how is that kind of enforced? Because I know in a recent application, I think one of the issues was there was a lack of a community meeting. And so just making sure that those community meetings are had.
So the community meetings are required, and what they're required for pretty much anything that goes to a public hearing, anything that goes to the planning and zoning boards. The way it's laid out now is the applicant has to notify everybody within 500 feet. They have to host the community meeting. They're hosting it here in council chambers. It's on the third Thursday of the month. And basically the applicant presents their case, kind of gives an overview, almost kind of at a town hall. Staff is only here to be fact checkers and just to explain the process. We're not here to say whether we support or not anything. It's just talking about the process. The idea is that the applicants and the residents can kind of work out any issues they have before they even submit it to council. So then it becomes a more efficient and effective application. When they submit their application, after they do the community meeting, when they submit their application, they have to submit along with the application the minutes of the meeting as well as the attendance records of the meeting. The code says that anybody that is in the audience has a right to give a rebuttal to those minutes if they choose to do so. So by the time it gets to a formal application, in theory, it's been vetted, it's been worked out. Any issues that they have could be worked out so they could change the application before it's even submitted, and therefore it should make it more expedited.
And then the meeting documentation, so I don't know when that 8 went to 7 or whatever, if it was used to be 7 and then it went to 8. I think one of the issues we had, I don't know, John, this was your experience, but on planning and zoning, was that the materials would change and you wouldn't get a time to get them, and that 8 to 7, I think that was back in the day where they actually still used to deliver the packets to your door. Mm-hmm. And it was a timing element of making sure that the packets that came to your house were the actual packets you go vote on, because part of the issue is that if you are seeing materials for the first time up on the night of the meeting, you don't have a chance to look at it, and it makes for an awkward time. As long as now with technology you're able to submit the package via iPad and whatever, however it is, email, that has got the most up-to-date information. But that was my sensitivity to that change, that just making sure that the packets and then the information that got published wouldn't change last minute. Give people the...
And staff feels that 7 days is appropriate with the technology. The fact that there are briefings usually with P&Z members, some of them the day of the meeting, some of them a few days before, but it's really rare these days that we get, especially with the new process where they do everything up front and they submit stuff after they've had the community meeting, and hopefully all the issues are worked out. And it worked out with staff, because everything's going to be vetted by staff before it even gets to P&Z. So there shouldn't be any last minute changes to the application.
And so what is the process? If someone comes in day of with a new plan, we still allow them to present it, right? How is that dealt with?
We would say we would either recommend they continue it or just they would continue it. We wouldn't take anything in. Yeah, we wouldn't take anything in that.
I just, when there's that line, right, do you let them even show a slide? So if they say, no, this is our new plan, here it is on a slide, versus, and there's that balance, right? Because you say, I listened to feedback and we made this last minute change to try to help address concerns, but no one's ever seen it before.
In that case, we don't anticipate that happening anymore because it's not going to get to P&Z until after it's gone through all of DRC's recommendation. And once they have DRC's recommendation, they're not going to want to make any changes to the plan.
I just think there's a good, it doesn't have to necessarily in the bylaws, but I think there should be an understanding of the practice of, are you going to accept last minute materials that constitute part of the application or not? So just because it has come up multiple times that I remember. But anyway, that's. And then on the consent agenda, I mean, is your agenda that heavy that you feel the need to have a consent agenda? Because I can't remember I was on planning and zoning during some heavy periods. I can't remember ever having an agenda where we felt like a consent agenda was even needed, but that would be my thought on it.
I have a similar concern about that, honestly. I feel like at that level, everything needs the scrutiny.
Even if it's just an affirmation of a vote that says, because I mean, when it comes here, how do you even know? I mean, and some could pass consent agenda 3-2, and then it starts to get awkward as to, you know, which one got, why did someone not vote for consent agenda? I mean, would that ever come up? I mean,
Or would we be notified that the vote came from P&Z as a consent agenda item?
So
I would just say take it out. I mean, there's no reason for it. So
Yeah, I was gonna actually offer an extra sentence on there saying that, just to clarify, that somebody could remove any item from the consent agenda, but if there's no need for the consent agenda to begin with. I don't know. Do you have any feel for that, Dan? Is there?
Right. I've obviously worked in several jurisdictions where some do have a consent agenda. I've sat on planning and zoning commissions where they do have consent agendas. It's nice for some things that are, like, for instance, the private property rights element where it's dictated or it's mandated or you know, preempted by county. And it's just really something that is just a quick, you know, that it should go right through. Meeting minutes could be on consent, things like that really don't garner much discussion, or items where there's really not a whole lot of discretion for planning and zoning.
see, Dan, that's the only thing I can think of is meeting minutes. And I was like, well, that just takes, like tonight took a 3-second vote, you know? So, I mean, my years on planning and zoning, I never saw a need for it. And I think, you know, we pretty much should get to the meat of things right away. So there's no real little details to sweep through real quick.
Okay. Anybody else have any other
Oh, yeah.
concerns?
In the community meetings, Dan, there's going to be a city rep there, right? Somebody from, okay.
Right.
And in that, you know, the one thing I think a lot of times is we are all involved in this, you know, we need a 12-step process of getting out of it. We get so entangled in it, we understand what's going on, but the community people don't understand, you know, what's going on. Will they thoroughly explain step by step what the next step is, what that step, you know, entails, what they have the right to do, stuff like that?
Yeah, so staff will be here to be not only just the fact checkers, but to walk through the process. You know, here we are at the very beginning. This is a community meeting. There's several steps to go forward. There's different ways to appeal it. There's different opportunities for you to come out and speak at the public hearings, whether it's P&Z or council. So yes, we will be there and that'll be the opening of the meeting, as staff will give an opening introduction, not about the case, but about the process. And then as the meetings occur, or as the meeting occurs, we will be here for fact checking.
And maybe like a little info platform too, with, you know, contact info, our contact info, your contact info. They have questions, anything like that would be probably helpful to the residents. And then again, and I've talked about this, and this just drives me crazy. I've been talking about this for what, 5 years now, 6 years, the 500 feet thing. So if we're going to have a community meeting and somebody's building something, but it's 700 feet across the lake from a house, that house isn't going to be notified. So they won't be able to attend the meeting, even though it's only 700 direct, there's nothing blocking them. If we were a city and we had all blocks, then 500 feet is a lot, but we have lakes, and I find that to be just a little bit troublesome, and that a lot of people aren't going to be communicated to about the meetings.
With the code change, but.
Yeah, that's in the code. That was just taken straight out of the code of the 500 feet. So we'd have to amend the code if we want to amend the distance requirements.
Don't do that.
Dan, who takes the minutes at the community meeting?
Staff does. Oh, at the community meeting, the applicant's required to take the minutes. So they will bring someone to take the minutes.
Is that normal? I mean,
It is.
It actually is, yes.
so I just didn't know. I'm kind of like what Councilman Guthrie was saying about the average person knowing, how to take the minutes and things like that.
Yeah, they'll take minutes, and the procedures manual actually outlines what a typical minutes is. It's really just a summary of what the issues were, how many people were in attendance, who was in attendance, what the main topics that were discussed. It's not a verbatim, it's not very extremely detailed. It's just, here's what came up, here's what the issues were that were identified. And then at that, they take it back, they do whatever refinements they want before they submit the application, and then hopefully it's, that gets submitted with the application, so council, P&Z, everybody can see what was discussed at the community meeting.
When would the citizens be able to get a copy of that so they can look it over if there's anything that,
It would be made available as soon as the application is filed.
So it's, in my experience, it's pretty typical at a community meetings held by the applicant. We actually, having it at City Hall is better because a lot of times the applicant picks the forum, venue, I should say. And sometimes they can pick it in something that would be advantageous for them, and they can pick the time as well, which sometimes they pick to be advantageous to them. And also when planning and zoning held, and we were the community meeting, it's awkward because a lot of the community gets up and they express their concern, and then they want you to vote, and they're like wanting a vote. They're wanting you to vote it down because they've just expressed their concern, and it's not even any vote. There's not even a vote to continue it forward, and so it's an awkward kind of meeting, in my opinion, to do it at the planning and zoning level. So I think we're striking the right balance of having it here, having staff be involved, but also having it more the responsibility of the applicant. I just was concerned about making sure that it happened, just because I think we still are a community that likes to be, our city is a community that likes to be heard. So just making sure that they are conducted.
Yeah, it absolutely will. They're actually in the code. That language is in the new code that was adopted, not so much the bylaws, but it's in the code.
And Dan, I gotta say, I love this because as somebody who's been to a community meeting with a developer and done it at a different location with no city staff there, we were told things and not told things. So I think, having city staff here, everything's going to be on the table, be legit, and I'm really excited about, adding this.
And I know the staff is recommending a motion on this, so I assume that this is not overly onerous on staff to be present and that y'all...
You've already adopted that in code, so we're going to be here.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Let's open it up to the public. Anybody from the public have any concerns, questions, comments?
Dale McDowell, 108 Chancellor Court. I see several excellent ideas. Community meeting here, exclusively here. Publicly accessible, without any question. Because that hasn't always been the case. We've done this in living rooms. And it was never right. So, regarding consent agendas, again, I had 9 years of P&Z experience. I'm not sure that that's a broken system as it is. Let's address it, provide everybody the opportunity to transparently, not just miss the opportunity to hear something discussed because you didn't get there by the time that agenda item was voted on. So let's give, I just don't think P&Z is a broken system. I will tell you, I probably attended more P&Z meetings than I should ever have attended.
Wait, have you not been to a P&Z meeting?
I may have fallen asleep on a few, but it wasn't because I didn't get a chance to speak. And so consent agendas limit that. And somebody's got to take the initiative, either a planning and zoning commissioner or a member of the public, to take something down and put it at the end of the agenda, at the end of the entire agenda. We're stretching out a meeting. In reality, trying to more efficiently address a meeting. If that was the rationale. This is inventing a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. Thanks.
Thank you. Really keep the clock there.
Sorry.
Anybody else in the public? We have another member of the public present. Does he have an opinion? No. Okay.
Have an idea.
Let's close the public hearing. Close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Do you want to talk about removing the consent agenda issue, or do you want to do any other changes?
I'll make a motion. I did a motion.
Yep, it's time for a
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed planning and zoning commission bylaw changes as proposed with the exception of the item labeled addition of a consent agenda space.
My second.
We have a motion and a second. Laura, would you read the vote?
Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Garrison, Councilmember Wurzel,
Aye.
Mayor Miles.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. All right, our next item is the ordinance to authorize loans for up to $20 million utility revenue in 2022. Laura, would you read the ordinance title?
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Maitland, Florida, authorizing the borrowing of money in the amount not to exceed $20 million to finance certain utility improvements approved by the city in its capital improvement program, establishing its intent to reimburse certain capital expenditures as described herein, with proceeds of future tax-exempt financing provided for conflicts, providing a severability clause, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. We have Mr. Gray to walk us through this.
This is just the first step to provide the overall backbone to future borrowing that we need to have for the utility system. We've already had one $10 million bank loan. You've approved $20 million in FRS loans. We haven't done all the work yet, but we have committed to use all of that $20 million. Part of it is 1792 going south whenever it gets going, so we can't use that money for something else. So we just need more cap with all the projects for phase 2, 3, and 4 of Domrick, and as what's been outlined in the CIP book, all the different projects that are going along. Before we go forward, anything else will come back to you as a resolution. So this is just the ordinance to allow us to borrow, and any specific loan agreements or borrowings will still come back to you for approval as a resolution.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Right, yeah, this is just the first reading for this motion. I mean, so whenever we get the motion, somebody's going to, I'm sure, set us up for when we won't have a second hearing on this. But does anybody have any questions or anything? Okay. Does anybody from the public have any?
Yay!
All right, here we go. And let's close the public hearing for that. Any further discussion? If not, a motion will be in order, and then we'll be looking to bring this back to the second reading.
I'll make this motion. I make a motion to introduce an ordinance to adopt by ordinance approval to borrow up to $20 million in utility debt and set the public hearing date for June 13th, 2022.
I will second.
Thank you, Vic. A motion and a second. Lori, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Councilmember Woodhull,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay. Discussion. So we have for discussion is strategic planning session summary. Sharon, this is our cues you up. Takes through
Feel a little bad, maybe.
Yeah.
this. We could talk quarter.
Well, no decisions need to be made tonight. First, I just wanted to give you feedback from our meeting, compares 22 to 23, and come July, we're gonna have to make some decisions about these things in the budget. And there was just a couple of things I wanted to point out. One is Independence Lane North. We had pretty much 4 people in support. We haven't even bought the right-of-way yet. And now there's one person put their initials there. And so it's a pretty hefty project, not only in terms of the cost of the right-of-way from the church as well as Rialto, but also then constructing the road. It'll be a multi-year project, so.
I thought it was a given.
I did
Isn't
too.
this funded by the CRA?
So one of the problems.
Yeah, all of us did.
One of the problems is funding is not, I mean, it's a great predictor of success, but and we'll get to another one, but also it's support for that when other things come flying at us. We're down a significant amount of staff. And so, I don't see that changing. Maybe if there's a recession, possibly. So we really want to direct our efforts where you want us to go.
Yeah, I'll change my star right now. I literally thought that was a
A
given.
done deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought you were going forward with all full speed, and I was under the impression, I think talking to both you and Mark, that this was weeks away.
Well, that was the report that Mark gave us, was that this was under active negotiation. So I think we all went, okay, cool, we'll move on because we know it's already going there.
For the right-of-way, but there's a price tag, which might be a little higher than what's in the budget. So that's sort of the ongoing support to say, how much do you want if this price tag takes away from something else?
I mean, from a discussion standpoint, I think it's tough to create a downtown off one block. And so if our goal is to create a downtown, I think the most, obviously the north and south way of Independence Lane should be a priority, with the north because we've already got a majority of the right-of-way purchased. And hopefully we can build on momentum so that maybe one day it will also go south. So I would say, I don't know what you want, but I would want.
I just wanted to go over it, so you
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of just cover it. We didn't have a lot of time.
And I might be alone, but I would say my affirmation would be to move forward with that.
And then the other one that was concerning is the septic to sewer conversion. Now, granted, I think we only had Mike Thomas, I don't know exactly who, maybe Dan, maybe it was you last year. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And we haven't even connected one home. Like, you haven't even heard from these residents yet. So funding can come from state revolving, you're gonna have to pass all those, we're gonna have to increase rates, but also it's going to get contentious when people have to hook up and they don't want to hook up. And that's sort of what we're hearing now is it's expensive, and this is just phase 1. There's 3 more phases. Yeah, total of 4 phases.
Yes.
And no one is even hooked up yet. So the complaints we're getting now are mostly, it's messy, it's a construction zone, but your cost is starting to become an issue. So, sorry, we just want to make sure where nobody said this was a priority. It's a massive undertaking. It's a massive undertaking for Public Works. Robert, it's taking up, it's not water, Mark's time negotiating with them, but then ultimately, no one's even connected yet. and we're talking about 400.
On this one,
And including sidewalks, which,
So I guess my question is, and I think what I'm hearing here, it would be, Independence Lane would be one, then the other 4 with 2 votes would all be secondary, if I'm hearing this right. I mean, I don't know if we need to do,
well, the urban
like a meeting to
forestry,
go over what things are needed and how much, and what this would look like going forward, but I definitely would put Independence Lane North as top priority, and then the other 4 as secondary.
so maybe before the next meeting, because I'm going to run out of the ability to talk, you might want to rank these for yourself. And then we can, if you email them to me, I can re-rank them and see if it goes, like, it's not just about the budget. I mean, if we have a recession, sales tax falls off, then you're making choices. It's about making some choices. Now, the library has 2 votes, urban forest, that's consistent, pretty much, walkability, consistent to the one-offs are one where, that's the question. Like Independence Lane, it's not, Splash Pad is not $3 million, but Independence Lane quite possibly could be $3.5 million. So,
Didn't we already budget for the undergrounding master plan?
so the master plan is going to be done, so it's the master plan is going to be in development, but then you've got to implement it. So you've got to say, we're going to put dollars in front of undergrounding or not.
So it sounds like there is some misunderstanding of the assignment. And so if we were to rank, for example, everything on this list individually, 1 to whatever, 15.
Well, no, that's it. So, I mean, I guess we're forcing it to go, you each have 3, and there's a total of 5 of you, so that gets to 15. So it's sort of the top 3, and that's what creates, so maybe your top 5.
Okay, or top 5, but my understanding before, and it sounds like kind of echoed, is that we were looking at things that we needed to prioritize in terms of budget, but we should be ranking them, if I just look at this list, irrespective of whether I know that some things may already have budgets attached to them, like the CRA or undergrounding or things like that, just not factor that into my prioritization?
No budget is adopted except the budget you're in right now. So you have adopted money to purchase the right-of-way for Independence Lane. Sorry. Money that's in 2023, you've not adopted. You only adopt, the budget when you set the millage rate. So that's where you go, you know what, Independence Lane isn't quite as important. We want to move up, name it, whatever it is. I mean, things move in and move out. So that's, I don't know if that helps, but only the year you're in is where you budgeted, but it also speaks to political support for those items. Because, one person thinks it's great and 4 people don't, it's kind of a difficult.
Well, for example, speaking for myself, the entry features, for example, which is like the signage coming in and out of the cities, that was the one, I'm the one. But part of my calculus was that seemed relatively easy to get done, so like let's just get it done and prioritize getting it done, like in terms of a cost. But is that, if I'm ranking it next to the library and Independence Lane, would I, then no, but.
The process forces you to do that.
Right, so that, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that I would rank them differently now, so I think I understand.
Well, it can be different because we've been working on those entry features for about 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it hasn't come easy.
Well, and that's part of the, just that, and similarly with the library or anything where we were going to use American Rescue Funds, I was thinking, there's a timeline on when you have to use that money. And but certainly it sounds like it's sending a message potentially that we're not interested in some of the other things that I think we are.
Right, and that's not, again, when it says entry features, it doesn't mean 4 people are against them. It just means that, right, like you said that's important. But when I look at next to Independence Lane North, I'm thinking, how do we differentiate staff? Because we can't budget for all of it, and we don't have enough staff to do all of it. Even if you gave us more positions.
So you would want us to re-rank these?
I think if you wouldn't mind, just like, what's your top 5? And then instead of 3, you have 5. And that might create more cohesiveness in some of
Sharon,
these.
did you say we need to all get together and really sit down and talk about what's going on with Independence North? I mean, tonight's not the time, because it's probably going to take a while, but, I mean, I'd like to know, exactly what's going on with who said what agreements, what's our, what's in our way of accomplishing what we want to get to, so.
I think it's a good idea, Vance. I've been thinking about that too. I mean, I think we've been thinking about it a long time. It's been a long time coming with a lot of, the appraisals and the kind of general view of how we're going to get to it. But I think we might have forgotten a lot of things along the way. And a lot of people have also filled their minds with other things as they come up and we're just kind of waiting. But I think we do need to. I think we all have an idea that we want to get into Independence Lane North, but they might be 5 very different ideas at this point. So it might be nice to get together for a workshop on that. And I think now is the time because there are things that are starting to happen. We just got the appraisal back. People who are interested over there. Just make sure that we're all, that our expectations are aligned, and nobody's surprised by that.
I think we could say the same for the library as well. Obviously, that's a very high priority situation, and we all know it, but we also have heard that we're still in the early development phase, so I don't remember if I ranked it or not, but clearly it's a huge priority and something very important that we all know needs to happen. Like Lori was saying, if we know that there's rescue funds that we've already kind of mentally earmarked, then I think we need to circle back on that as well.
Okay. And while we're on that topic, and since we're in discussion, I mean, what works for you all for a workshop? I mean, is it, I know that we sometimes do them before, 5:30 before a 6:30 meeting, or we do it in the middle of the day, which is difficult for some people to get to downtown.
Like an off Monday, or an off Monday?
Or an off Monday, yeah. We could do, a non-council meeting night and pretend we're a council on Mondays. Do you all have a preference?
I don't.
I'm fairly flexible there.
I mean, we're about to start the budget. When do those start?
July.
July, August.
So, I mean, if we're gonna do them, probably should do it before we start that. Would be my only.
Yeah.
I mean, off Mondays are probably the somewhat easiest because we've either earmarked this. Lunch for me, like those daytime ones are just tougher because it takes what is usually an hour plus meeting. And essentially, it's an hour, another hour for me to get here and back. Unfortunately, but that's just me. I'm the only. I'll make it work.
I prefer evenings as well.
Okay, let's try to do it on an off Monday.
Well, in June, is anybody on vacation? I know kids are out of school.
I'm out for half the month, traveling, conferences, work. So I can give Lori dates, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't announce them, but yeah.
Did you file your notice of unavailability?
No, I did not, thank you.
Okay. So, to wrap up, Sharon, you'd like to hear from us on our top 5?
Yeah, I'll send it to you in Excel, and it's easy enough to plug in.
Just send you my top 12.
Yeah, if you want to send me a top 15.
There actually are 15.
That's where I got the 15, but
That's 3 times 5.
that's me overanalyzing.
Okay. Anything else, Sharon, on that one?
No.
Okay. The other discussion item is Board of Adjustments and Appeals. Laura,
So for the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, there are currently 4 vacancies. 2 of them have been vacancies since last June. And coming up for appointments, the BAA is a board that requires certain criteria or certain expertise to be appointed. And so out of the 4 applicants that we currently have, only 1 has the knowledge and experience requested. So if you were to want to appoint the one, you would still only have a board of 3. And per your current city code, you require a quorum of 4 to hear anything appeals by the building code official or the fire code official. Statute has changed since the last time we dove into this board, and you're not required any longer by Florida statute to have a local board of appeals. So the option would be to sunset this board possibly at the next meeting and defer for a plan of appeals to be one of 2 ways. But Florida Building Code is appealed, or any decisions the building code official would make is appealed at the Florida Building Commission, and then the fire marshal, his decisions are appealed by the state fire marshal's office. They do put together sometimes joint committees to hear appeals, and of course anything, if there's a conflict between the building code and the fire code, whatever is most restrictive for health and safety is what prevails. So that's what right now you only have one viable candidate to put, and that would make your board a board of 3.
Okay. So the question is whether we want to continue this or do we want to allow the state to perform this function for us.
And this board has not met since 2009.
Have they not met because they don't have a quorum? or have they not met because nothing has come before them?
No, I think it's more so nothing has come before them. It's how infrequent that it's really utilized. So scrambling to get, it kind of pigeonholes us because you have to have certain criteria. I mean, from the code, for section 4.7-26, knowledge and expertise in technical codes such as design professionals, contractors, or building industry representatives. For instance, one or more members of the board are unable to attend a meeting, the alternate would serve in the replacement. However, you require later in the code 4 members necessary to hear decisions or doing an appeal on our building code official or a fire code official. Right now, you have 2 members and you could possibly appoint 1.
But you have, if we don't have a board, it would go to a state to decide
Yes.
a local matter, which I think is not necessarily the best solution.
I agree.
So what
Well,
happens?
yes and no, because if you're appealing, if the building code official is being appealed at the Florida Building Commission, which is all they are hearing is interpretations and going with Florida Building Code, and then to the fire marshal, it's being heard by the state fire marshal's office. And then they do some joint committees where they put multiple disciplines.
Yeah, I don't know for the applicant or for us that that's the best solution.
I have a question. Could planning and zoning not handle this and just make planning and zoning that kind of like a
I don't think that, I
Or
mean,
would
they're
they do-
approving the stuff and they're building it to code, so how would you have them hear the appeal on the code? There is one other option, of course, hesitant to. One option would be to possibly see if we could reach out to Orange County and get an interlocal. They have an 11-member board that meets monthly to hear on these matters. It could start there. If the applicant, now that's only if Orange County would agree to let us have an interlocal with them. There's always the, if it's not successful or someone doesn't agree with that avenue of being in Orange County, then it's automatically up to the state, yes.
I don't know, but I kind of like that idea. Because that way it still keeps it in the hands of citizens of Orange County. Have a say so.
Yeah, I guess I'm not that concerned about allowing the state to hear these things, because it sounds to me like this is a fairly technical thing. It's not like the Parks Advisory Board is going to give us, a very maintenance-centric thing. I mean, this is really a fairly technical review of conflicts between codes, and it's probably has less to do with maintenance aesthetic than other things. So I'm happy to go either way. Either we let the state have it. I don't see the point of us continuing to not have a staff board here. And it's been 15 years, since we've had it, 13 years or whatever. So I'm either to have Orange County, reach out to Orange County and see if they want to take this from us or let the state do it.
Can't tell them, we haven't had one in 15 years, it might help us out.
Yeah, right. It's not gonna be a-
It's not gonna weigh down their agenda.
So two people termed at, or ended their terms March of 2022, and only one of them is reapplying, is that what you're saying?
So
I'm looking at the list.
So basically on this board, last year when it was brought before you, you reappointed one and you had 2 vacancies. The alternate is vacant and one is vacant. There were not additional applications to appoint anyone last year. So now we're sitting on 4 applications, but if you look at the applications, only one meets the criteria defined in the code. So that will give you to 3 members.
Sure, I was just looking at not what's in my meeting materials, but just on our city website.
I think one of those members doesn't meet the qualifications to be reappointed. There's 4 on here.
I'm just looking at our city website, Board of Adjustment and Appeals. There's 4 current members listed. That's why I was confused.
And what does it show their terms as?
Well, and that's what they, so March 2022, so that's why I was asking, so.
Yes, so they effectively turned off, I'm sorry, I apologize for them not being updated on the website, but they have received, they both term limited out. And so they received their, Mayor Lowndes signed their letters and their certificates thanking them for serving on the board. We just haven't got them off there.
When you say termed out, they are not eligible because of term limits?
Yes.
See, this is where it comes wild, comes full circle. No? I mean, I don't know if we know if they're willing to.
So I don't love the county idea. So I think either the state idea, or is there any mechanism of having, is there any, I don't know if it's Vance or whatever, but having like a select advisory board to pick one of their members to serve on a seat on this board? Like we used to have on planning and zoning, used to have someone sat on TAB. Could you have one rotating member, just in the event that this ever came up, you had one rotating member that was willing to sit on this board?
I think you have to have credentials for this board, is that right?
Right, well, right, but, or I didn't know if there was a motion and it was possible, looking forward to eliminate term limits as to this particular board, I don't know.
Can't do it based on,
It's in the charter. I mean, you can do it, you just have to amend the charter.
And the term limit is essentially a 3-year term with 1 successive term. So they can serve a total of 6 years.
I feel like this is a really academic discussion rather than practical, considering how long it's been since this has actually been implemented, and the fact that there is a statutory procedure for implement this. I feel like at this point is the path of least resistance when we have no reason to believe that this is going to come up anytime again in the future.
You know what happens, council,
Yeah.
our person hires, and when we say that hasn't happened in forever.
Well, then we'll amend the charter next time.
talk about commercial vehicles.
No.
Is there a procedure for getting the state to take this from us? I mean, do we need to?
No, we would just bring it back and sunset it and then provide for a clause for appeals of the building code official would go to the Florida Building Commission, and to the fire marshal, it would go to the state fire marshal's office. And we would just provide that in our code, or we would tag in there as amended by state statute. And then if we have to revisit it down the road, we would.
The statute actually says that the state board takes appeals from either the official itself or to the local appellate board if it exists. So if it doesn't exist, then it goes to the state rather than going to the.
Okay, so just by operation of law.
Right.
And that, Mr. Schubert, is there an appellate process for the state board as well? Like there would be due process if someone didn't like their decision?
I'm not sure. I'm guessing that it's some kind of like APA petition for certiorari like they would normally have in an administrative decision.
It's a final agency action kind of a thing regardless.
Right,
Who makes it.
that's what I'm thinking it would probably be.
So that in that case, we don't have to. It'll
Just sunset it.
we don't have a board and yeah, these guys are going and decisions made for us.
But then if we later put people there, would it reinstitute?
I think so, right? If there is a then local appellate process.
We can go out and recruit. Well,
Those are the rest of the contractors needed.
just out of curiosity, I mean, because your question, your allowance is, you know, if there's an affirmative action necessary, it sounds like there's not. It would just be whatever was the state of affairs at the time an issue came up if it were to randomly do so.
So, Laura, does this help you?
I need to know if you want us to bring back to sunset it and let it default to the appeals process that is set forth in the statute, or if you want to bring it back and appoint the one member and then we sit and wait for more applicants.
Okay. And of course, we can't take a vote tonight. And I'm not sure there's nothing else.
Yeah, it's just a discussion.
I mean, aren't we kicking the can down the road by, you just, I mean, I don't know, if we appoint the one member, we just kick the can down the road until we don't have enough, right? And is that the right answer or the wrong answer? I mean, eventually, I'm assuming that we'll run out of applicants potentially for a board that doesn't ever meet. So,
Although we may appeal to some people.
pun intended, or?
No, no.
No.
Sorry. I mean, we've probably spent more time talking about it than it's worth, since it's not been ever,
All right.
so.
Well, let's, Laura, if we're still unclear on this, we can bring it back one time and give you a warning. Because we can't go to direct any kind of action, since it's a discussion.
But everyone's clear, this is the BAA, so it is building, Florida building code.
Right.
It's not Maitland zoning,
Yep.
nothing to do with.
My question on the appeal was that I'm not sure it's the best mechanism for, I don't know what it looks like. So if someone has an issue here and their only appeal is to go to Tallahassee, what does that even look like? Versus having the means to appeal in your own town, right? Do they have to travel to I don't know what that looks like. Is it a travel to Tallahassee? Is it a, because clearly that would alter what your appeal rights would even look like. So, I mean, I'm just, if that's what we want, but it's clearly, if you have to drive to Tallahassee and appear before a board in Tallahassee on a matter that is local, that would clearly be a deterrent to an appeal.
I can't say to that. I know that when I reached out to the Florida Building Commission, it was solely by email, prompted by a very quick email response, and then the guy followed up with a phone call, and it appears that they're working remotely still. He's not back in his office, and they're scattered from all over, so I don't know. I can find out more information on.
I agree with the technical aspect of it. I completely agree. And I'm not saying for or against this. It's just, it's clearly a challenge to have that be.
So, Mike, what is it, and I'm just wondering, what is it about the Orange County that you don't?
I just don't know that we want to see that kind of local thing to Orange County.
Yeah. Keep it in-house.
I would rather, I mean, if the decision is keep it local, let's keep it local. If the decision is we just think the expert should handle it, then we give it to Tallahassee and the appeal was the appeal. But again, I think we're probably beating this one up pretty
Yeah.
good, but.
I did speak with Chief Watts and the fire marshal and also Dan. I don't know if they have anything else that can answer your questions better. I mean, they have all three been in on it.
Yeah, we're available to answer any questions that you have.
Do you have any idea what the appeal would look like? Is it if it goes to the state board? I don't know if Will's ever been involved in any of that.
From what I understand with the Florida Building Commission, it's more of a written appeal, and then their committee meets and then they make a ruling on it. I don't know if they had you drive to Tallahassee in person appeal. I thought my understanding was it was all written, but I will confirm that.
Let's run that down, because it might help us to make a decision based on that, what it actually looks like.
I mean, I would lean towards sunsetting it and letting it go to Tallahassee.
Yeah, the local appeals board is really just a step. The statute says if they don't like the local appeals board, they'll appeal it to the Florida Building Commission anyway. So it's really just a step to get to the Florida Building Commission. It doesn't mean that we only keep it here and it doesn't go to the Florida Building Commission.
I personally am never inclined to remove a step of due process that someone has, whether it's in Orange County to me or City of Maitland doesn't matter as much to me personally. But to remove essentially one of the steps, like another bite of the apple, so to speak, it's a level of due process that you're removing before getting to the final decision. So that would be something I'd be reluctant to ever do. Or put my stamp on.
Okay, well, I think if we can kind of get our hands around what it actually looks like, see what it looks like, and then we can bring it back to the discussion. It sounds like it's been 13 years since we had an issue, so it'll probably be okay for a little while. Okay. All right. The city manager, do you have any report?
Nothing.
City attorney, Mr. Schuler?
Yes. I'm not sure if any of you have already heard this clip, but we had another hearing in the Peacock Court this morning where we had, where I would say it was a partial victory, strong victory. So in case, just to recap, they filed a complaint for Bert Harris for between $6 and $7 million, and we successfully got that dismissed. They filed an amended complaint adding 3 additional declaratory judgment counts, basically seeking an order saying they can continue operating and they're existing in this business forever. And we filed a motion to dismiss that. Before that was heard, they filed another amended complaint. So on this motion to dismiss their amended complaint, the Bert Harris, that is the cause of action for actual money, $6 to $7 million, was dismissed again, as was the 4th action for a declaratory judgment, leaving 2 where there's basically the judge says this isn't the right phase for this to be dismissed. We'll let it get further along before I decide. Unfortunately, so the risk of the money judgment, that is the $6 to $7 million, is again dismissed. However, the judge did give them leave to amend again, to try again. And so we expect that to happen again. And so we expect to have another motion to dismiss at some point soon.
Due to amend the Bert Harris complaint?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I would say it's not uncommon for a complaint to get dismissed twice by a judge before they dismiss it finally. Though obviously we're going to be on number 4, complaint number 4. So it feels a little bit like it's a little frustrating, but it's not uncommon.
Okay.
Except for re-election. Sorry.
The judge. She's referring to the judge.
So it's good news.
Yeah, I would consider it good news. Yes. Nothing else to report, I don't think. Yeah, nothing else.
Anybody have a report, Council?
I would just like to see if we could add on an agenda the discussion of the boat spaces, trailer spaces at our Fort Maitland Park, because before we reopen that park, I think we should have something in place. And I know how long it takes, with public hearings, it takes a while, so I would try to get that one on the agenda sooner than later. I don't know what the plan is, Sharon, you're nodding your head, but
Yeah, we talked before it gets reopened, that's something we want to deal with, so that's at least 2 meetings in ordinance.
okay, so I would.
And then signage, the easy part's the signage,
Yeah.
the hard part's the ordinance.
Yeah, so my thought was to get that discussion going before, just so we're not caught, because if we open the park without those signs up, when we put the signs up, we're gonna get a whole nother raft of problems. I think when we reopen it, we should have, and if we can't come to an agreement, then we can't come to, but if we can come to an agreement, I want to do it.
That's a good point. Yes, we've discussed that, so I think we,
Yeah, and that's something we have put way out.
yes, we have a September deadline for that. Okay.
She'll be here before we know.
Anybody else?
I just want to give props. I stopped by Tuesday for the trade your guns for $50 Wallow card, and that was successful, right? I think when I was there, they had 2 little submachine guns that were turned in, and a whole bunch of knives, and talking to one of the officers, I think we bring in, between Winter Park and Maitland, we bring in more than Apopka does, Osceola County, and a lot of other places. So,
We're well on.
we're well armed.
Hopefully from the west side. And I'd like to give a shout out to Chief Watts and his crew who came over to my house on Saturday night for a cooking lesson. My daughter now knows how to handle a grease fire, so thank you. But those guys are out there quick. Jeez.
Did they break in the door?
No, it's not. The dogs are out the back. We're all ready for them. We were just barely ready for them. Yeah. Anybody else? Anything else?
I and Council Guthrie was there as well, saw Dan Mathis graduate from Leadership Maitland at a Maitland Chamber meeting, and also learned about that program, which is cool, and would encourage anybody out there listening to look into that.
Join the chamber.
It's cool to have a Maitland-specific leadership program, I think, and they explained a little bit about, why, so it's good.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah, I see the chamber getting stronger too, so that's good.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else?
Did it.
We're done. Thank you. Let's hang on.